Hey guys, I wanted to talk to you about the final part of this mythology unit. I've been really impressed up to this point how many of you have been checking in, doing your assignments, sending me emails when you need support or clarification. So that's really awesome. I appreciate it. I know this is a tough situation, it's tough for me too. So the final thing you're going to do for this unit is you're going to be writing your own origin myth. Completely original, created from the ground up. And the difference, again, between an origin myth and a creation myth is that the creation myth is really the creation of the universe, of the world. An origin myth is the creation of something within that already existing world. And so we're going to be focusing on very specific type of thing, okay? So what I'm going to do, which is exactly what I would do in class, is I'm going to read through the assignment and talk about the rubric really quick, and then talk about a few specific things that you need to understand moving into this assignment, okay? So, create your own origin myth. It defines origin myth up at the top. It says a myth that describes the origin of some feature of the natural or social world. And we're going to be focusing on the natural world. There are stories set after the creation myth. They are stories set after the creation myth, which describe the origin of natural phenomena and human institutions within a pre-existing universe. So your task here, you will write an origin myth that will explain the creation of some aspect of the natural world using many of the same elements as Greek Roman, same, Norse, and Native American myths. So you've explored all three of those different types of mythologies, and you're going to incorporate certain elements from each one. So the requirements, broken up into three parts: the writing of the origin myth, the illustration, and then an explanation that goes along with it. So the writing of the origin myth. Your writing must be in a narrative format, and a narrative is just a story. Include the use of elements of the natural world. Okay, what I mean by that is there are four elements of the natural world: earth, fire, wind, and water. I want you to include one of those into your story. You'll notice that in a lot of the origin myths and a lot of mythology in general, they include in some way these elements. And then those are going to help you to explain the creation of a natural phenomenon outside of human control. So when I say natural phenomenon, I'm talking about things that occur in nature that are not in any way controlled by humans. And we've also kind of struggled in the past to understand how they occur. So we're talking about things like, examples could be things like rain, tides, tornadoes, hurricanes. A lot of people focus on natural disasters because they're really super interesting, but I've had people focus on very interesting like sand formations that occur in certain deserts, or ice formations that occur in certain parts of the world. It could be celestial. It could be things like how the stars got into the sky, or why does Jupiter have rings around it? Things like that, okay? So that's up to you to decide. A lot of people end up working on things like earthquakes or tornadoes or thunder or lightning, and those are all really good ones because you can come up with really interesting kind of crazy stories about why those occurred. And it must also have evidence of a cultural value. So when I say cultural value, this is the type of thing that shows up mostly in Native American mythology. When trying to think, in Turtles Back, in the world on the Turtles Back, they discuss certain they do a dance around the fire, and they talk about how that's something that became that was the birth of something that they continue to do culturally. What I'm talking about here is some sort of value that exists within your culture. Your culture could be America, your culture could be your religion, your culture could be your family specifically. So examples that I list on the assignment sheet are things like forgiveness, hospitality, friendliness, but they're all positive values. They're all positive things, nothing negative, okay? The myth must be titled, and so you need to give it a nice title, not, myth writing narrative assignment for Dunlaps. Okay, it needs to be at least 2 pages in length, double spaced, 12 point, not a huge deal. And then it also has to be accompanied by an illustration. So when you were reading any of the myths that you probably researched online had illustrations that went along with them to try to give people a better idea of what Thor looked like, or what Perseus might have looked like, and things like that. So the idea is that you're going to create an illustration that in some way represents your story, represents the creation of the natural phenomenon that you chose. Some of them are gonna be amazing, some of them are gonna not be great, okay? I'm not a tremendous artist, so it doesn't really matter how good it is. It can be stick figures, it can be whatever. I just need you to visually represent this. This is just another way of representing your story. The thing is, it has to be on a regular printer-sized piece of paper, and essentially the whole thing needs to be covered. Color, okay? This is not a big deal, but it is a big part of your grade, okay? So the way I describe it on the assignment is include a drawn and colored illustration on an 8x5x11 sheet of white computer paper. A large majority of the illustration must be in color, almost no white showing, and you must use the whole sheet of paper. The drawing will visually represent the creation of your phenomenon. Okay? And then at the very end, I want you to write a 1-paragraph explanation just telling me how your story qualifies as a creation myth. This is a creation myth because it shows the creation of earthquakes and the way that they began, and then maybe summarize your story very quickly. This paragraph only needs to be 4 to 10 sentences long, but the thing I want you to make sure that you do is also tell me where I can find your cultural value in your story. Because sometimes in the past, students have written these and said, hey, my cultural value was forgiveness, and I'm like, where? And they're like, oh, right there, and I'm like, oh yeah, there it is. So just point it out to me, okay? So those are the 3 things. We've got writing the myth, illustration, and explanation. And if you look on the back of this, it's going to break down where the points come from, okay? So pretty basic, written origin myth, meets the 2-page length requirement, explains the origin of one natural phenomenon, includes the natural elements, and includes a cultural value. Just those 4 things. Illustration, just the illustration, explanation, and then general effort and creativity. I'm going to give some points for this too. So remember, this is not a summative assessment. This is a formative assessment, okay? It's not informational writing, so I can't grade you summatively on it. Another thing to talk about here really quickly is this has to be completely original. You cannot use any existing gods. You can't use the names of real people. You need to try to come up with names that fit the setting of a time long ago before we understood what tornadoes were, okay? You can't set it in this time period. There can't be cars, there can't be technology, there can't be anything. It has to be original, and you have to set it in what feels like the setting of an actual myth, okay? Original, 100%. And I'm just looking at some notes here. So the expectations for the outline. The first thing you do, you spend a couple of days working on the outline. You can just bullet point your ideas in each of the parts. So this is a complete story, and it will follow the entire story arc from exposition to rising action, climax, falling action. So in resolution, you have to have all of those different parts, but it's only a 2-page piece of writing, so there aren't going to be that many things that fit into it. So when I'm looking at your outline, I just want to see bullet points for each part. Like for the exposition, this is what my main character's name is going to be, this is where it's going to be set, this is the time period, Next one, this is what happens in the rising action. I think conflict is one of those as well. So that's really what I'm looking for. Some people choose to pretty much write their entire story out in their outline, and that's totally cool. I really don't care. But all I'm really expecting, the expectation is just for bullet points, okay? And then finally, you guys may have noticed that I posted something on the stream of Classroom saying that I've changed the due date for this assignment. It's not due this coming Friday. It's due the following Friday on April 3rd. We're slowing down a bit. I'm not going to be asking you to produce something every single day. I know that people are stressed. Some teachers have given a ton of work, so we're going to kind of like pump the brakes a little bit. So you're going to have an additional week to work on this. So essentially, this whole week is pretty much just working on the outline and then writing the story and drawing the picture. So you don't really, this week and next week, so you don't have to stress about this and you don't have to rush too much. Okay. You guys are doing great. I hope you're all good, being safe, being healthy. Okay. Adios.